The Huskers finally revealed their depth chart. Matt Rhule really made us wait. Gary, I honestly didn't expect to get one. I thought he was just going to be one of those types of coaches, but we got it. We're just going to go through some things that we found interesting. Tell us what you guys think in the comments. What's the most surprising thing to you after this depth chart has been released? First thing that jumped out to me was Borkature and Fidone looking like they're splitting reps at tight end, but that's not really what it is, Gary, right? We're just going to have a full-time system with 2 tight ends.
I don't know that it's going to be full-time. They list a fullback too, right? So are you going to always have 2 tight ends or frequently have 2 tight ends with a fullback and a running back and just be playing 1 receiver at a time? So you know they're going to have, trip sets in 2 receivers, X and Y, Z's, all that. So I think it's just going to be interchangeable. Like they said, a lot of positionless football. You got guys that listed at positions that can do other things. So I think you'll see that for sure. I think one, that'll help the offensive line, having those 2 to help block, but also setting up like that, looking like you've got 1 or 2 receivers, and then you actually have 2 tight, your 2 tight ends that are more than capable receivers. So when you go down the chart, you're going to get more than 11 guys. So I think you're going to see those guys starting at those positions. I don't think you're always going to see those positions on the field.
I kind of expected Fidone to have that spot locked down all to himself.
Based on what?
Talent, coming in as a higher ranked prospect than most of the tight ends we see come through Nebraska, combined with the way they talk about him in camp, combined with the fact that he's got these expectations of himself to be the best tight end in all of college football and then go pro. That's why I'm hoping he is the starting tight end, but it just looks like he's split in time because they're constantly going to have 2 tight ends out there.
All those things you said were expectations talk. I don't disagree. Like, I think he could be a stud. I hope he is. I hope he comes out and stars. I have nothing against him. But we don't know, right? No one knows what he's capable of except for him and people who've been watching him up to this point. So based on hype and expectations and recruiting stars and rankings and all that, yeah, I agree with you. But Borkature, there's tape on him. You've seen what he can do. You've got an experienced guy, like snap count experience. So I guess you could be surprised or not be surprised either way based on those 2 things.
That's a great point. Now, you mentioned receivers. So obviously Billy Kemp is going to be the starting slot. He's built for that life. Right. He's been there. He's done that. He's proven it. Isaiah Garcia and Alex Bullock being the starting wide receivers, I did not see that coming. Alex Bullock, because I'll be completely upfront, never heard of him. And I hate to admit that.
Yeah.
Isaiah Garcia, I'm grateful and glad that he's back. I didn't expect him to wrangle that starting job back the way he did, but good for him. My question is, where's Malachi Coleman on this depth chart? Because I understand that Rhule's been saying the freshmen are not going to have to play. They're not needed yet. But I didn't think that applied to Malachi Coleman.
Honestly, I don't feel like I've heard a lot about him, but I think with the veterans you do have at that position, for as many young guys as you have, that's just naturally how it should and most likely I think would play out when you're putting a first year kind of system or whatever together and you're going into the first game of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if things change. The Alex Bullock situation is interesting to me because Casey Thompson supposedly said that he ran the best routes of everybody in the receiving room. I've heard of him, like I knew a bit or whatever. And for him to just kind of jump up, it's like, okay, there's another guy that was overlooked that has a lot of talent that didn't get an opportunity with the previous staff. Or how much of this is because Marcus Washington isn't back from his hand injury yet? Xavier Betts, who Sims singled out and talked about how fast he was and how he liked throwing to him, decided to leave a couple weeks ago. Not to take anything away from him or Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, any of those guys, but does this depth chart look the same if Xavier Betts doesn't leave and Marcus Washington isn't injured?
No.
But we don't know. Like, we can assume that and say that based on like our assumptions we had and based off of who was there last year and did what. But there's surprises up and down the roster, the depth chart or whatever. We talked about a couple. We'll get into some more, especially go to the defensive side. But maybe this would have happened regardless. We don't know for sure, but the questions for me for sure is there. And I think a lot of people would have the same response you have. Like, no, for sure it'd be different. So do we get super excited because this kid blew it up and is so good? He took a guy who started last year and put him on the bench, and these freshmen that were super hyped are coming in. They're not getting to jump up to the top because this kid's so good. I don't know. I hope so. I honestly am hesitant to get too excited when you've got a bunch of freshmen who Satterfield and Rhule both kind of made hints that they're super athletic and talented. They're just having a hard time picking up the system. And then you're one of your best targets, most consistent targets, obviously aside of Palmer from last year. It's coming back from a broken hand or whatever injury he's got at this point. And then a guy that your starting quarterback that you just brought in was talking about how fast he was. He liked throwing to him and, good route running. That's the biggest question mark to me, just because, not because of him, but like what happens if, like we're saying, that's the biggest question mark, or biggest, I wish I could ask 4 or 5 questions to the staff type of deal.
Now, the biggest shock by far has got to be Anthony Grant, last year's leading rusher, not just being second, but third on the depth chart. And this isn't a Ramir Johnson or situation. This is straight up Ramir's number 2, Anthony Grant's number 3. We knew he wasn't going to be starting because Rhule's talked about how he's been having too many fumble issues. I'm going to throw an insane twist your way. You know how much I love Anthony Grant. I actually don't have a problem with this. I'm just going to keep me mouth shut and trust what Matt Rhule is saying. My only concern is I just hope we don't end up losing Anthony Grant to the portal because of this. He's 24 years old. The clock is ticking if he wants to go to the NFL, and this is not a good look.
On paper, like on depth chart paper, I agree with you, but you remember when we did the Satterfield video and we watched all the different plays that South Carolina ran last year? There was a lot of different running backs, receivers carrying the ball, tight ends getting handoffs, different things like that. I feel like this was more of a 2 running backs, if that makes sense. Like, to me, it's not he's third. To me, it's he's backing up Irvin. Because I think no matter which one of those 2 got the start, Ramir was always going to be the number 2 and essentially be the third down back. He's the best receiving running back we have. He's a speed guy. He can do more things, but body type and run style, Irvin and Grant are a lot more similar. And I don't think there was ever going to be a Ramir Johnson because he's not that power runner like they want. He can run strong and stuff. I'm not saying he can't, but body side, what is he, 185, something like that? The other guys are 210, 220, or somewhere around there, 225, whatever. I think one of those 2 was going to be the starter. The other one was going to be the third back, but essentially be the backup main running back, and Ramir's going to kind of be that hybrid receiver running back, third down running back position.
Yeah, that makes good sense to me. Let's move on to defense. A little over a year ago, about this time, we made a Cam Lenhart reaction video. We got this 4-star edge rusher, and then we sat down and watched his film, and neither of us were overly hyped. Apparently, we were wrong. They're raving about this guy in camp. What's changed, do you think? Or did we just have it wrong?
We did the video, and then a couple weeks later, they were like, oh no, he's not coming. It was like a Mickey Joseph recruit situation, and he didn't get it okayed or get everything, whatever he was supposed to do with the staff, and they didn't want him. They wanted somebody else, so he decommitted, and they were like, that Nebraska wanted him to decommit, and they were going to get somebody else. Essentially, he's back for the second time, but like my whole thing was the same thing it always is when we talk about these recruits, is like, I got to see what they do at this level against this competition. Like, everybody can be hyped up and have stars and rankings by their names, but we saw it with the Ernest Hausman deal where he was listed a certain rating when he was here, and as soon as he went into the portal, his rating still showed what he was, and then Michigan picks him up, and all of a sudden he skyrockets up and he's the top guy in the portal. So I mean, and that same thing happens. If Alabama would have recruited half of the guys on our roster, they'd be 5 stars instead of 4s, or 4 stars instead of 3s. So that's all my, like, whatever you want to call it, take or hesitancy on that during that video was like, I just want to see what he can do or see what happens when he gets here. But apparently he got here, got bigger and stronger, and is tearing it up. I thought he looked good in the spring game. They're not wrong, talking about he's like a man child, a fake freshman or whatever. The dude seems like he's huge. And yeah, I mean, we still need to see what he can do, but maybe we should have been a lot more excited when we did that one.
Now, recently we put out our linebacker preview, and the name that we didn't speak much about was Javen Wright. He's a converted safety, just like John Bullock. Both of those guys are backing up the starting linebackers. What can you tell me about him that we missed?
Obviously not much because I didn't know that he got moved to linebacker.
A lot of people didn't.
I don't know, man. I mean, I remember when we did the defensive back video, I think it was last season, talking about him a little bit, about him being like a little more rangy and longer and things like that. And I remember I wanted him to be more in the conversation of the nickel instead of the more converted linebackers. Well, here's the other way. Now he's getting on the field, not in the nickel for that, but on the as a linebacker. So like we've said before, like I've said before when we've done things, I'm just going to take these guys at their word, you know, the coaching staff and things like that until I feel that like I shouldn't. And wherever they're moving guys in different positions, who they've got starting, things like that, I'm just excited to see it roll out. You know, I don't have, especially guys like that. I mean, how often do we see him play? So it's not like I can sit here and pretend I know, yeah, he's going to be a lot better fit there. I could see him doing that. So I always get a little excited when a guy moves from one position and then is like seeing playing time, or they're hyping him up like we can't wait to get in and do this, because he has to be really good because you already have guys at that position and he was recruited at a different one. So it's like, oh shit, all right, let's see what he had. You know, there must be something that stands out or jumps off to him, like we got to get this guy at this spot. And then to see him excel and rise kind of, you know, somewhat to the top at that, I'm pretty excited to see what it looks like.
And another thing that we had wrong, I think, in the linebacker video is we thought that MJ Sherman was clear cut ahead of Chief Borders. And I think we said that MJ Sherman was a senior and he's listed actually as a junior. So those two corrections. He is set to be splitting time at the jack linebacker position with Chief Borders.
Do you think there's going to be much splitting like that early on? Do you think that's the oars where they're like, we're not really set on a starter going into the season, so we're going to split time with these guys and carry into the season to figure out who the starter is? Or do you think they're going to make a decision, or they feel that the decision's close to being made, and from the first game on, you're pretty much going to have, you know, like the tight end situation or this situation? Or what was the other one? Was there a receiver spot or something that was?
A few of them have oars. I just assumed that that's what it meant. But yeah, it could be that they're just waiting to make that decision.
From what Rhule talked early on is like the importance of depth and wanting to be able to just mass rotate guys, whether that's bits and pieces here throughout the whole game or every so often the whole position kind of changes. I don't know, we'll see. But I think the starting, you know, the depth chart or whatever, and like the oars and things like that, I don't think a lot of that's going to matter if he's really interchanging guys like he's kind of alluded to early on.
Tell us what you guys think about the depth chart. We'll see you guys after the Minnesota game, if not before. Thanks for hanging out. Go Big Red.